Hey guys, thanks for tuning in with us today. It's so nice to just come together and to do worship together, especially this week, right? In the light of all our new restrictions, it practically bans us from coming together and it bans us from seeing each other physically. And it creates this illusion that we're all alone, right? We're isolated. But that's why it's necessary to always remind ourselves that we're not alone. Right? We're still together. We're in this together mentally, emotionally, spiritually, missionally, and virtually. Right? For those who don't know, a few of us have been meeting up on Zoom before a church service, and we stay together during the service and till after the service. We still hang out a bit, just so that we can solidify the reality that we're still together. We're still one. We're still united. We're still in community. So, if you're interested, please do ask one of our pastors and board members for the invite link. So Christine and I, we moved into our townhome about a year and a half ago, and our basement, it's half garage and half mudroom. So how it works is there's like a main door where we go in with our car, and then there's a wall with a basement door, and it leads to the mudroom, and this is our usual exit and entrance. And every time I'm going from the garage into the mudroom, Christine would always remind me to lock the door. Which I am terrible at because I don't know why. It's just not second nature to me. And I'm usually okay with it, you know, because this is my thinking. I'm like, okay, there's this huge garage door that's closed, right? Who's going to pry it up and break all the mechanical pieces and sneak through our basement door, right? And it's because of this thought process, I'm not too stressed when I do forget. However, one morning, I woke up and I kind of did my usual routine, right? I laid in bed for 5 minutes. I stretched. I reached over to my phone. I looked at the notifications and I got a new one. And it's from the camera downstairs in my garage. And this is what I saw. Oh my goodness. I didn't close the garage door. And then I booked it downstairs to see if the basement door was locked, and you could guess it, right? Lo and behold, it wasn't. I didn't lock it last night. So in a panicked frenzy, I ran around the house to see if everything was there, if anything was broken, if the dog was okay, if I had any random stab wounds on me. And thankfully, everything was okay. And I'm just so grateful that my huge mistake didn't cost me thousands of dollars, or better, didn't cost me the life of my family. I was lucky enough to just come away with an upset wife. We all make mistakes like these, right? Some mistakes, they're great party stories. Other mistakes are embarrassing, they make you blush. And some are really serious and costly. But some of the most costly mistakes people make are in their spiritual life. And I'll tell you why. Our spiritual life, it determines the whole direction and trajectory of your life, right? And a lot of people end up going the wrong direction in life, and that leads to a lot of regret. Thankfully, our Bible, it tells us how to avoid most spiritual mistakes so that we can live this meaningful, fulfilling, purposeful life where we can help others. So, in order to avoid making spiritual mistakes, we're going to point out how we make spiritual mistakes. And that's our question today. How do we make spiritual mistakes? And our answer is by 1, listening to lies, and 2, ignoring the truth. We get this from our Bible passage today where we're looking at the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent. But first, I need to explain some of the backstory so it'll make more sense. In previous chapters, we see that God, good, loving, all-powerful God, He created all things good, and we're brought to really zone in and look at 2 very specific good things, 2 trees. One tree was the tree of life, which God allowed Adam to eat from, but the other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and God told Adam to not eat from that tree or he will die. And then after that, God created Eve after the trees and after the command to Adam. And it's important to kind of look at the order of this creation because it looks like Adam had to teach Eve what God had said to him, right? You can imagine Adam saying to Eve, like, hey, yo, babe, you see that tree over there? Yeah, it's no good. Just stay away from it. Don't touch it. Don't even look at it, right? It'll kill you. Like, just, don't even ask about it. And Eve was probably like, had her questions, but whatever. Adam knows best. Now, with that all set up, let's read our main passage. It's from Genesis 3, 1-6. Follow along as I read. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden?'" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" "You will certainly not die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took it and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. From our passage, we get our 2 points today. Let's look at the first one. The first mistake we make is listening to lies. Now, I'm a victim of this at all levels. I'm kind of naive now. I was even more naive as a kid. I remember when I was younger, living in my house, just in Pine Ridge, actually. I was playing with my toys one day, and I thought I was just home alone with my mom. And my oldest brother, Sam, and my dad, they came out of the basement, and I was like, "What? Where did you come from? I thought you were out." And my dad, being a dad, he told me, "In the basement, there's a secret tunnel." And my brother, he played along too. He's like, "Yeah, it's huge." So I was mind blown. You can imagine, as a kid, you had this grand imagination. So I imagined this secret passageway that leads you to this intricate tunnel system through the whole neighborhood. And I'm like, how did I miss this living here for so long? So obviously I spent the rest of the day looking for the secret tunnel. And then I spent the next day looking for the tunnel. And from then on, probably for a good year in that house, that would be one of the things I did when I had free time. So over the years, or over the months, I would persistently bother Sam. And I'm like, "Please tell me where the tunnel is." And he'd just laugh it off. And then I go to my dad, and my dad's answer was always, "I'll tell you when you're 18. And I was probably like 8 or 9 at the time. So 18 is double my lifetime. I couldn't wait that long. And so I didn't. I tried my best to find it. But just imagine this with me for a second. Sometimes my other brother, he would be walking down the stairs, and he'd catch me putting my ear to the floor tiles and knocking on it, listening intently. And he would just be like, what are you doing?" And for me, right, I couldn't tell him. Dan isn't 18 yet. He doesn't know about the secret tunnel. I can't break that secret. So I would just be like, nothing. And he would just, thinking back about it, Dan and I weren't, as close when we were younger, but it's because he probably thought I was demon possessed or schizophrenic or something, or, psychotic. And obviously now that I am older, I know that was just a little white lie I fell for. And there was never a tunnel, I think. Anyways, I share that story to show how we can fall victims to some pretty stupid lies sometimes. Some are harmless, but there are some that could cost you everything, right? Our Bible story was written because each of us has to deal with the same serious lie. We're going to zone in on the second half of verse 1. The serpent talked to Eve, and he asked her, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden?'" The way that the serpent lies to Eve is quite genius, right? We know that by the end of the conversation, he straight up lies to Eve about what the fruit does and what it gives her. But before that, there's another step that we often miss. It's a two-step process, and I want to focus on the first step for our point today. The first thing the serpent gave to Eve was a suggestion, an implied lie. And that's where people usually get caught. When the serpent asked, "Did God really tell you not to eat from any tree?" That wasn't a lie. Obviously, it was a question, not a statement. It couldn't have been a lie. But what it was doing was it invited Eve to think, man, isn't God such a killjoy? What a stickler. Always like, no, no, no. He's so restrictive and closed-minded. Sheesh. Did God really say that? And that was the suggestion that was going through Eve's head. And Eve, poor Eve, she tried her best to resist those suggestions, but she failed because she wasn't firm in what she believed. And there are two clues that kind of show us that Eve didn't have a strong foundation. When Eve refuted the serpent, she brought up at least 2 points that weren't consistent with what God said. First, she said to not eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. However, we know that there are 2 trees in the middle of the garden, right? And they have names. The tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And from her response, it kind of sounds like she just avoided both. The second clue was that Eve said, "You must not touch it or you will die." God didn't say that, right? He said, don't eat from it. She's like adding little extra nuances to the rule. And maybe it's Adam's fault for teaching her wrong, but we'll get there later. Eve didn't understand God's command. And she didn't know what the tree was about. And because she didn't understand, she eventually gave into the serpent's lie later on in the story. But it all started with a suggestion. And that's where it starts with us as well. All of us, we have to deal with thousands and thousands and thousands of suggestions every single day, right? Whether it's at work or school, TV, internet browsing, there's always ideas floating in the background telling us what's good and what's bad. And usually when we come across a bad idea, right, we kind of stop it. Like if you come across those clickbait ads that say, hey, a secret plant was found in Asia that reduces aging by 20 years. Easy, that's a lie. I'm not going to fall for it. But once in a while, a suggestion will slip through the cracks and go straight into our minds and straight into our hearts. I remember one time my old boss at a hoist company, he was telling me that just the day before he was on his computer and girls in his neighborhood, they were messaging him saying they want to meet up and they were close by, only 2 kilometers away. And if he was alone, and he was so stressed out, right? He's like disgusted with the world. He's like, what happened in these girls' lives that got them messaging random men in the neighborhood and giving them really specific like proximities? And I kind of laughed and I told him, they're just clickbait ads. They're not real people. It's just thrown on there to get people like you, I guess. And he was like so embarrassed, right? And companies, they know this, right? They know that if they present something on the internet or on TV in a very attractive way, there's a good chance we'll cave and we'll be like, take my money. That's why companies are paying like $5 million for a 30-second Super Bowl ad. And they pay it because they know they'll make up way more money from just those 30 seconds of suggestions. So now the question for us is, how do we resist bad suggestions? Well, I have 2 suggestions. The first one is, watch what ideas you expose yourself to. Right? The Bible, it tells us that bad company corrupts good character. And the point is that bad company fills our minds with bad ideas. But this also happens when we consume a lot of like media on TV and the internet and the radio. I think back to my teenage years where my mind was in like a really dark place. I was a really, really angry teenager, and I would always like post emo stuff on my Facebook updates. And I think it was really the music I listened to that made it worse and worse and worse. Every day I'd listen to songs like I'm just a kid and life is a nightmare. And I believed it, right? It seeped into my everyday thoughts. So be careful of what kinds of media you expose yourself to. Because if you hang around bad influence long enough, sooner or later, a bad idea is going to slip through into your minds, into your heart. The second suggestion is to fill yourself with good and healthy ideas, right? Hang around people who love you enough to talk about important and sometimes offensive things. Study the Bible, like not just read it. In James chapter 1, he tells us that if we listen and then we forget, we're practically fools, right? But instead, let's wrestle with the Bible, work on it, master a Bible verse, learn it in a way that changes your life. And when you do that, you're building a strong foundation that cannot be shaken by bad ideas and junk suggestions. The second mistake we make is ignoring the truth. We get this from verse 6. I'll read it out for us. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Okay, let's be real with ourselves here. When you usually think about the fall of humanity based on the story we read today, whose fault was it? Eve, right? It's Eve's fault, right? We all think that. But if you look closely at our verse, the Bible says her husband was with her the whole time, right? He was just chilling beside Eve and the serpent as they were chatting. And I would say that Adam is as guilty, if not more guilty than Eve, right? Because he knew better than her and yet didn't do anything. He ignored the truth. I remember a couple years back, we had Zoe camp in the summer, and we were tenting in Drumheller. And by Drumheller, there's this really beautiful mountain face called the Hoodoos or something. And then we could climb it, and it's pretty epic, right? So we decided to go one day. At the beginning of the camp, to ensure safety and accountability, I set up this ingenious system called the buddy system. And you know what it is. It's you have a buddy, where you go, they go. You go to the washroom together. You go to get food together. You just keep track of where they are. You're responsible for yourself and your buddy. Anyways, we went to the Hoodoos. We had lots of fun, took pictures, and 2 hours later, we returned. And when we pulled into the campsite, I saw a youth just sitting, totally depressed on a chair. And I'm like, oh, dang, we forgot a kid at camp. And he just chilled there by himself for 2 hours. And yes, in the scenario, it's ultimately my fault. I take that blame, and I talked to the parents and I apologized and they understood. But then after, I asked his buddy, I'm like, yo, what? Why didn't you tell us that your buddy was not with you or was still at camp? And he said, well, I saw him changing in the tent and I didn't want to see that, so I left. And it's what? You knew where he was, what he was doing, when we were leaving the campsite, and you didn't say anything? And it's just kind of one of those what in the world moments, right? But really my fault for choosing incompatible buddies. But look at this, Adam, he just stood there watching Eve get tricked and manipulated and did not say a single thing to protect her or to correct her thinking. It just took a simple, oh, hi, Adam here, excuse me, sorry, God didn't really say that. Or, hey, Eve, I think this is a bad idea, we should ditch this serpent. Nope, none of that, complete silence. So by ignoring the truth, Adam became passive in saving Eve. And as the story goes on, it's even worse, okay? How does it get worse than that? Well, when Eve offered Adam the fruit, he took it and he ate it, even though he was the one who got direct instructions from God, and he was the one who probably taught Eve. So by ignoring the truth, Adam was active in doing the wrong thing. And you can like totally imagine what kind of guy Adam was, right? Like just kind of standing there, clueless, like a bit of drool dripping down from his mouth. He seems like the perfect definition of a biblical fool, right? And it comes out of this. Adam's mistake was that he knew the truth. He knew what was good, he knew what was right, and failed to act on it multiple times. And we see it so clearly. How does this apply to us? Well, once we know something is true, we're responsible to live by it, right? Because laziness and passive inaction, negligence, those are sins we don't really think about, right? Because in those cases, we're not really doing anything. But the Bible tells us that if you know what is good and you don't do it, that is sin. And it'll probably be one of the sins that we regret the most in eternity. Not these things that we did do and messed up on. No, it's these things that we didn't do, even though we knew we should have. Our sin comes from not doing. So how do we combat this? Well, a lot of ways. Some people have really good willpower. Other people have, I guess other strategies. But for myself, what I really try to do to be intentional about living out my faith and taking opportunities to do God's good work is to actually take control of the calendar, right? So this is how it looks. You take control of your time, right? You fill each day with things that matter, right? Like last week, we learned that there should be a balance of work and a balance of rest. So you set aside time to build this calendar around your relationship with God. And what that may look like is you're setting aside time to learn more about God, to meet up with people, to reflect on Jesus and his work on the cross, and to let that change you. And if you're intentional about that, about taking control of your calendar, then you're able to actually live a week, live a whole day where it reflects the truth, right? That you are a son and daughter of God, loved, and you've been blessed with this mission, with a chance to join God's work to make a difference on earth. So take control of your time. Take control of your calendar. I think that's one of the best ways we avoid ignoring the truth that we've been blessed to know. As always, we'll end with a recap. Our question today was, how do we make spiritual mistakes? Our first point was by listening to lies. So to combat that, watch what you expose yourself to. Avoid bad ideas and fill yourself with the truth. The second point was by ignoring the truth. So avoid this by scheduling life in a way where you can live every moment with purpose built on the truth.